searchable. And there's over 50 of them. Some of them are, when I say 50, some of them might be one dictionary that's a 3-volume set. So the total number of files is over 50. See what I'm saying? And so there's a bunch of them though. That'd be good for any a lot of my stuff that I have is from old law dictionaries and stuff like that. It's amazing some of the stuff you can find about color of office, corruption, you know, that kind of stuff. And so anyways, I guess we ought to get started.
Yeah, whoever comes late will join us.
What's that?
Whoever comes late will join us.
So we're going to start off with citizenship. Where the heck is it? Oh, there we go.
Citizenship. Glenn, if you have questions as we're going, do we hold those to the question period, or do we kind of
Well, that's one of the things I start off with is I'm going to cover a lot of material. I would encourage you to write them down, and because I don't mind answering questions, but I might answer it as part of the presentation. We have a lot of material to cover. It's going to take us over a day for sure. And in the past, it'd take a long day, and I've added, well, last time I did one here, how many presentations did I have? About 6? I think it was about 6. Anyways, I've got like about 20 now, okay? And so we're going to have a lot of material to go through to cover. I made one presentation up last night about the courts. And it's a work in progress. I just barely started it, obviously. So you know, we'll take it as it is. But you know, we're gonna have to. So, but definitely write down your questions, and there'll be opportunities to ask your questions after each presentation. I guess what I'll do is give everybody an opportunity to talk about that. This is actually. Are we recording now? Might as well start recording.
Yeah, it's recording.
Okay. This is actually a quote by Cicero. Power and law are not synonymous. In truth, they are frequently in opposition and irreconcilable. There is God's law from which all equitable laws of man emerge, and by which men must live if they are not to die in oppression, chaos, and despair. They're divorced from God's eternal immutable law established before the founding of the suns. Man's power is evil, no matter the noble words for which it is employed or the motives urged when enforcing it. Men of goodwill, mindful therefore of the law laid down by God, will oppose governments whose rule is by men. And if they wish to survive as a nation, they will destroy the government which attempts to adjudicate by the whim of venal judges. And essentially, that's what's happening today, but a lot of it's because of our own ignorance, okay? Because we just do not understand what's happening. And once you understand, once you start getting your head around it, I mean, the common law jurisdiction is here, okay? There's within the last, you know, I don't know when they did this common law court in BC, but I'm guessing it was within the last year or two. They went and got the BC courts to produce a common law court. And at common law, and we're going to talk about that, and so maybe we'll just keep moving here. The greatest weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. You know, everything is an illusion. If you think, you know, the best slave, if you think about it, is the slave that thinks he's free. You know, really, you know, and so they're certainly not going to, you know, change that. You know what I mean? And so they're always going to be telling you how free you are, you know? Yeah. But, so where does sovereignty come from? Sovereignty exists because of common law. It's been here from the beginning of time, okay? And it talks about it in the Bible, okay? There's 2 classes of citizens. We're going to go through that stuff. The people of all countries with the common law of England owe their sovereignty to the common law. But It's actually everywhere on every planet. There's court cases that, I should not say every planet, every country, okay, on the planet, everywhere it exists, okay? Common law exists everywhere. There's a common law, I've read books that talk about common law of Germany, a European common law, international common law. There's a lot of different kinds of common law. And it's basically, you know, again, related to sovereignty. In Canada, and we're going to talk about Canada and common law of England because it's easiest to prove, okay? And that's what we're going to be going through today. The presentation on common law covers the common law a lot more completely, and that's a whole separate presentation. So, do you know who you are? What is a sovereign? We're going to talk about that. Who is a sovereign? Where does sovereignty come from? The rights and duties of sovereignty is covered in the common law presentation, and how you can lose your sovereignty is covered in another presentation called Color of Law. And they're using things that look like law as a mechanism to get us in what the courts view to be contracts. And how do you regain it? Okay, all you have to do is assert it. All you got to do is say the words. Sovereignty is the right to rule. Sovereign can be a king or queen. Sovereign can be a group of people, and it can be a living soul. This is an English court case. Sovereign, a chief ruler, supreme power, king or other ruler, limited power. An action is not maintainable against a foreign sovereign. This is an English case. Sovereignty is the right to govern a nation or state. Sovereign is the person or persons in whom that resides. And there's that guy, and you ought to check out this website. It's called private-person.com. That's the guy in BC that got the courts to produce a common law court. And it's private-person.com. And he's got some free training on there. There's also some paid training, but I would say at least go through the free stuff. And he's got some webinars that you can go through, and it's quite interesting. I've gone through some of them already, but there's even one YouTube video he's got that's basically by him. For the very idea that one may be compelled to hold his life for the means of living or any material right essential to the enjoyment of life at the mere will of another seems to be intolerable in any free country where freedom prevails, as being the essence of slavery itself. And yet that's exactly what's happening here and in America today. Think about it. And it's because we the people are completely asleep at the wheel. In a common law country, the sovereigns are the people. Common law is everywhere. This is Dred Scott versus Sanford, U.S. Supreme Court again. The words people of the United States and citizens are synonymous terms and mean the same thing. They both describe the political body who, according to our republic institutions, form the sovereignty and who hold the power and conduct the government through their representatives. They are what we familiarly call the sovereign people, and every citizen is one of this people and a constituent member of the sovereignty. This is a Toronto court case in Canada. The sovereign people, through the representatives, have created the court and the board, as well as the municipal council, and have defined the rights and duties of each. So this is any common law country. There's even Australian court cases that talk about it. This is another Canadian court case, the Lord Nelson Hotel case, which overturned the income tax before they made changes. Okay. The Parliament of Canada and the legislatures of the several provinces are sovereign within their spheres defined by the B&A Act, but none of them has the unlimited capacity of the individual. So everything is voluntary. It really is. This is an Australian court case. Translated into constitutional terms, it denotes that the sovereign power which resides in the people is exercised on their behalf by their representatives. Gee, that sounds like what they're saying in the States. The powers of government in this country are derived from the people who are the ultimate sovereign. Again, gee, that sounds familiar. And this is an English court case again. Every individual was sovereign over himself. This is a New York case. The people are sovereign, are not bound by general words and statutes restrictive of prerogative, right, title, or interest unless expressly named. Acts of limitation do not bind the king or the people. The people have been ceded all the rights of the king, the former sovereign. Now, that is almost word for word what it says in Canadian statutes. What was that?
I said that's a good one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's more. There's lots more. At the Revolution, the sovereignty devolved on the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of the country, but they are sovereigns without subjects, and have none to govern but themselves. The citizens are equal as fellow citizens, and as joint tenants in the sovereignty. Devolved, think about that. And so, what they're essentially saying is that in England, the people were sovereign, and it evolved away to the crown, and at the Revolution, it devolved back. Yeah, isn't that what they're saying? But in a way, it's all voluntary. Everything is by consent. People of a state are entitled to all the rights which formerly belonged to the king by his prerogative. It will be admitted on all hands that with the exception of the powers granted to the states and federal government through the Constitution, the people of the several states are unconditionally sovereign within their respective states. Governments are but trustees, okay? The government is a trust. And governments are but trustees, acting under derived authority and have no power to delegate what is not delegated to them. In other words, the only power the government has is delegated, okay? So you think about that. Do I have the power to take your notebook there and give it to him because he doesn't have any money?
No. Sure you do.
No.
If I let you.
Well, there you go, yeah. You have to agree to it.
Yeah.
That's right. And so then, but I can't do it by force, and neither can the government. You see what I'm saying? I can't take something from you and give it to him, and neither can the government. And the only way they can do that is something has to change.
They fool
okay?
us.
They have to, that's right, it's an illusion. Anyways, let's go on with that. Have no power to delegate what is not delegated to them. But the people, as the original fountain, might take away what they have delegated and entrust to whom they please. The sovereignty in every state resides in the people of the state, and they may alter and change their form of government at their own pleasure. And so, again, who's in control? It's we the people. And we can change, we can do whatever we want to the government. They're our servants. Sovereignty itself is, of course, not subject to law, for it is the author and source of law. But in our system, while sovereign powers are delegated to the agencies of government, sovereignty itself remains with the people, by whom and for whom all government exists and acts. So, you think about it, sovereignty itself, of course, is not subject to law. And what they're talking about is law, statutory law. Okay? Of course, we the people are subject to a common law court. You see what I'm saying? And actually, technically, we might not even be, or we can, I don't know if you remember in the old days, there was outlaws. Even common law is voluntary. Okay?
Well, that's us.
And well, we're outlaws in the current system, but we're not, the arguments we're making is we're saying, I don't want to be out of law. I don't have a problem with common law. I just have a problem with all this commercial law. And I don't want to participate in this commercial system. And that's essentially what most of us are saying. So in their system, we're considered outlaws. But in the old days, the outlaws were people that wouldn't participate even in the common law system. See what I'm saying? And even common law is voluntary, believe it or not.
Right.
And so, but if the outlaws murdered somebody, the county sheriff would still round up the posse, and they'd go out and find them and bring them to justice. You see what I'm saying? But the bottom line is that everything is voluntary. Everything is by consent. So, but the important thing to understand is that we the people are the author. Remember, we delegated the authority to the government. So we're not subject to their codes, rules, and regulations. We can't delegate authority and then have the government come back and tell us we have to do something. I didn't delegate authority to do that. I don't have the capability of delegating authority to the government to tell you to do anything. You see what I'm saying? And neither do you. And so the government doesn't have authority to tell me to do anything. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not subject to law. I'm still subject to common law. And that's a jury of our peers. And so if I commit a breach of the peace, well, then there's a problem. And as far as peace officers are concerned, then they still have, even though their statutes only apply to commercial entities, okay, they can still come and round us up. With everything they do then is based on common law. You see what I'm saying? And so they actually wear two hats. And even the judges, the multiple hats on judges. But on a peace officer, they wear two hats, one of them as a peace officer and the other one as law enforcement, okay? And what that means is law enforcement is basically, you know, one of the administrators enforcing their core codes on their subjects. You see what I'm saying? Anyways, we're going to go more into this. There's no such thing as power of inherent sovereignty in the government of the United States or Canada. In this country, sovereignty resides in the people, and Congress can exercise no power which they have not by their Constitution entrusted to it. All else is withheld. But in considering the question before us, it must be borne in mind that there is no law of nations standing between the people of the United States and their government and interfering in their relation to each other. The powers of government and the rights of citizens under it are positive and practical relations, plainly writ down. The people of the United States have delegated to it certain enumerated powers and forbidden it to exercise others. Okay, and that's probably a little bit of a weakness although there is maxims of law about delegation. We're going to go through that. It's basically the same in Canada, although in the U.S. there's a 10th Amendment that says that any power not expressly granted to the government is hereby withheld, and there's not that in Canada. And so that you know, you still have to make the argument, but based on maxims of law, they still don't have a power to do anything other than what's specifically granted. But you got to make the argument. You got to fight with them over it. And of course, you know, they got all these lawyers and all the rest of it. Delegations of power. The sovereignty of a state does not reside in the persons who fill the different departments of its government, but in the people from whom the government emanated. And they may change it at their discretion. Sovereignty then in this country abides with the constituency and not with the agent. And this remark is true both in reference to federal and state governments. A delegation, a delegate cannot delegate. This is a maxim of law. A delegate cannot delegate. An agent cannot delegate his functions to a subagent without the knowledge or consent of the principal. The person to whom an office or duty is delegated cannot lawfully devolve the duty on another unless he be expressly authorized to do so. Okay? In other words, you know, it was Canada Customs, as Canada Border Protection Agency or something like that. Agency is the operative word. Okay, that means it's a private corporation. It's got owners, and the government might not be the owner. The government could, but they may not be. And so, in the Constitution, see, have you ever heard of CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Service?
Yep.
Well, that's owned by the government because it doesn't say it's an agency. Although there's probably stuff in there that says that it's an agency somewhere. But when it says it's an agency, I've worked in aviation for a long time, as anybody can see from my resume. And so I've worked at airlines, and all airlines have an air agency certificate. And so, like U.S. Airways has an air agency certificate, a certificate signed by the administrator for the FAA that says that U.S. Airways is an agency of the government. And so anytime Central Intelligence Agency, think about that for a minute. You have a private corporation that's owned by who knows who that has the power to go and collect information. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. All this due intelligence. And of course they're giving it to the government, but who else are they giving it to? You know what I mean? I mean, there's different departments working against each other. They do that all the time. You see it happening. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what happens. They're sitting there doing this kind of stuff. And in fact, there's there's YouTube videos that talk about the fact that every agency like this actually has two divisions, and one of them is owned by the Vatican, which wouldn't surprise me at all. And so then basically you have the Vatican Jesuits, you know, pulling the strings behind the scenes. Now, I don't know if there's anybody who happens to be Catholic in here. I want to say for sure right now that some of my best friends are Catholic. One of the guys that I get a lot of this information from, Patrick Ellis, lives in Toronto. He's actually in Quebec right now, but he's Catholic. And so there's lots of wonderful people that are Catholic, and I don't want to say anything negative about Catholic people, just like I have good friends. There's a guy by the name of Jeffrey Katz. He sends out emails under Catman1, Catman1@gmail.com. Anyways, he's a really good guy in Texas that he won a court case, and he likes to stir the pot, kind of like I do. And so, you know, I don't want to pick on any particular group, although there's lots of evidence that the Vatican is actually satanic, and there's YouTube videos on it, and we could watch some of those today if you want. But anyways, so the bottom line here is this is a maximum law. A delegate cannot delegate unless they're expressly authorized to do so. Here's another one. A delegated power cannot, again, be delegated. And then a deputy cannot have or appoint another deputy. Okay, they just don't have the authority. It is true that at common law, the duty of the Attorney General is to represent the king, he being the embodiment of the state. But under the democratic form of government now prevailing, the people are kings, so the Attorney General's duties are to that sovereign rather than to the machinery of government. And that's who the Attorney General is supposed to be representing, although, you know, that's debatable in Canada, even the States. A lot of it is because they're confused. You know, there's this Sestake Trust out there that, you know, is a fictitious entity, and if you don't know the law, then you get to be the surety for it. The law of Congress do not extend into the territorial limits of the states, but only have force in the District of Columbia and other phases that are within the exclusive jurisdiction of the national government. You know, at Coutts, okay, it's called a port of Coutts, okay, that's a maritime port, and yet it's on the land? How's that work? Yeah. You know, anyways, the exclusive jurisdiction which the United States have in ports and dockyards ceded to them, okay, it has to be ceded. You know, there's actually, originally I thought there was no land in Texas that was actually ceded to the federal government, but actually there is. But the federal government only has jurisdiction in areas that's actually ceded to them. Like in Edmonton, like the military base, if it's been ceded by the province of Alberta, okay? Otherwise, they don't have jurisdiction. And you have to understand the nature of the federal jurisdiction. And if you think about it, all police are federal, and the courts are all federal, okay? Even the provincial courts, they're all federal. And again, you have to understand all of that stuff and the nature of that jurisdiction. But so you can be on the land of Alberta without being in the province of Alberta, and that's what you have to understand. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're going to talk about pursuit of happiness here. This is in the U.S. Declaration of Independence. The Magna Carta is called the Great Charter of English Liberty. The Canadian Handbook for Judges cites the Magna Carta, page 777. Magna Carta says, we will not deny or defer any man either justice or right. Well, actually, it doesn't say that. That's a summary. But actually it says, and I think, do we? No, we don't. But it actually says that we'll not sell justice. We'll not, it's actually very important wording, so that is not, they don't want to talk about selling justice because they do that all the time. But that's exactly what the Magna Carta talks about. The Magna Carta is not a unilateral act emanating solely from the spontaneous will of the king, as the charters of the predecessors of John. Neither is it a treaty, for we cannot say it was concluded between two legitimate and independent sovereignties, nor between two nations, nor is it a law. The barons do not appear in it as subjects, for they are freed from their promise of fidelity, and the king, brought captive, placed before them, submitted to the conditions which the conquerors imposed upon him. Magna Carta is therefore a contract, which but resembles a treaty concluded between two nations in that one of the parties, in virtue of the law of war, can impose its will upon the other. And that's habeas corpus case in Quebec, believe it or not. They say that Quebec is a French civil law case. Well, not habeas corpus, that's a common law writ. So don't give me that. So it's, again, civil law is all voluntary. You have to agree to it. They play this little game about civil law and all that. I mean, you think about it, and we're going to go through this, but you file a lawsuit here in Alberta, you have to follow the rules of civil procedure, okay? And so civil law is everywhere. Civil law is actually Roman law, and we're going to talk about that too. The Queen or the President has the oath of office. We, the people, owe no allegiance to the Queen or the President. The Queen or the President owes allegiance to the people. If you think about it. Why do people set up governments in the first place? And this is one of the things that we were talking about earlier. We set up governments for protection against foreign enemies, protection from each other, to administer disputes in a fair and impartial manner. And the only legitimate function for government is to protect the rights of the people. If you think about it. So we have the hierarchy. You have God, who's King of Kings, created we the people. We the people created the government, and the government created corporations. And so God, we the people, government, corporations. And there's court cases that talk about that too. What's this one here? Is that? No. But our rights come from God. If our rights come from God, only God can take them away. A citizen of one state is a citizen of every other state of the Union. The individual, this is Hale versus Henkel, a U.S. Supreme Court case. The individual may stand upon his constitutional rights as a citizen. He's entitled to carry on his private business in his own way. His power to contract is unlimited. He owes no duty to the state or to his neighbors to divulge his business or open his doors to investigation, so far as it may tend to incriminate him. He owes no such duty to the state, since he receives nothing therefrom beyond the protection of his life, liberty, or property. His rights are such as existed by the law of the land long antecedent to the organization of the state, and can only be taken from him by a due process of law and in accordance with the Constitution. Among his rights are refusal to incriminate himself and the immunity of himself and his property from arrest or seizure, except under a judicial power of warrant, a warrant of the law. He owes nothing to the public so long as he does not trespass upon their rights. So there's some key terminologies in here. First of all, he owes no such duty to the state, since he receives nothing therefrom. Okay? If you receive any privileges, okay, then that's a contract. And everything changes.
Driver's license is privilege.
Well, yes.
Going to jail is a privilege. Everything's a privilege.
Jail's definitely a privilege. But it's all by contract.
Yeah.
Okay? They have to get your consent. And the courts hold up everything, and that's the reason, if you look on the driver's license, and that's why I tell them I don't have a driver's license. Okay? It's because the thing on the driver's license is me, it's a corporation. Of course, the one that I carry is an Arizona driver's license. And I can prove under Arizona Administrative Code, it says in there that it's a corporation. And so, you know, I can prove that. Alberta is a little bit different, and it's harder to prove. But the bottom line is that the name is under Roman law, it's all block capital letters. At common law, nothing is ever spelled all block capital letters. So it's still not you. It's an image of you. Think about this. It's an image of you, but what would happen if you took an image of a $50 bill and tried to treat it like it's a real thing? Okay? That's called counterfeiting, which is a type of fraud, and they know it. And so the image that's on that driver's license is a fraud too. And so anyways, but and more, it says his rights existed by the law of the land long antecedent to the organization of the state. Antecedent means before, okay? So law of the land is common law. And so what that means is that common law has always been here, okay, from the beginning of time. And we're going to go through a common law and why that's law of the land. So when they say statutory laws, law of the land, no, that's not true, okay? Absolutely not. That really makes my blood boil. You know, I got to tell you, my background is... well, I'm not going to say it here on this tape, but I have a certain religious background, and I used to go to church all the time. It used to just make my blood boil. Some guy'd get up there and say, hey, did you obey the law of the land and follow the speed limits on the way to church today? I just like, you know, I mean, it's just make my blood boil, I'll tell you. So I just got tired of going to church and coming away mad, you know what I mean? So I just don't go. And there's a guy in Texas, he's passed away now, but his name is Rice McLeod. And
Oh, yeah, he died?
yes, he did, yes.
Oh, gee, that's awesome.
But he's someone that I respect a lot, and he's an old Texas guy that just had a real down-to-earth way of saying things.
Yeah.
And one of the things he used to say is that the biggest problem in this world is third parties. If you think about it, he's 100% right, okay?
Yeah.
All lawyers are third parties. They go into court and they say, this guy did this and this guy did that, and they don't have any first-hand knowledge of anything.
Or proof of.
That's right. And so then he goes on and he says, so why on earth would you want some third-party preacher involved in your relationship with God? I mean, talk about just well said, you know what I mean?
What was his name? Rice McLean?
Rice McLeod, yeah. My relationship with God is between me and him. So there are at least two major classes of citizens, state and federal. And we're going to talk about that now. And these two classes of citizens have always existed. There is in our political system a government of each of the several states and the government of the United States. Each is distinct from the other and has citizens of its own. One may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. And there is a clear distinction between national citizenship and state citizenship. Instead, this provision protects only those rights peculiar to being a citizen of the federal government. It does not protect those rights which relate to state citizenship. Citizenship of the United States does not entitle citizens to privileges and immunities as citizens of the state, since privileges of one are not the same as the other. The privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States do not necessarily include all the rights protected by the first 8 amendments to the federal Constitution against the powers of the federal government. Did you hear that? Federal citizens don't have access to the first 8 amendments, okay? Now you have to understand, and we're going to talk about this, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the courts have said that they're to reaffirm certain common law rights, okay? So the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are to guarantee certain common law rights against the powers of the federal government. Really, it's just the federal government alone. But and state governments it was different, okay? But so the bottom line though is that federal citizens don't have access to the first 8 amendments. That's Second Amendment is the right to keep and bear arms. That's a common law right. Fifth Amendment is the right to due process. That's a common law right. You're not entitled to due process as a federal citizen. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The right to face your accuser, the right to a jury trial, there's all of that stuff. And and when we're going into this, we're going to go into admiralty maritime law, and we're going to talk about that, and that's all for federal citizens, okay? So again, you don't want to be a federal citizen. A federal citizen's a slave, okay? The only absolute and unqualified right of a United States citizen is to resident within the territorial boundaries of the United States, okay? So U.S. citizens don't have any rights. Federal citizens don't have any rights. They're slaves. Such construction ignores the rights of a state in virtue of its sovereignty to confer citizenship within its own limits, where the rights incident to such a status are not of the citizenship mentioned in the federal Constitution. It does not follow that because one has all the rights and privileges of a citizen of a state, he must be a citizen of the United States. Such a distinction has long been recognized. Again, it's the power of the state to confer citizenship on their citizens. See what I'm saying? So again, it's something that's a fundamental principle of law is what I'm trying to show here. The rights of the original citizens of the states as such are not under consideration in the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is the U.S. equivalent of the Charter in Canada, okay? And I'll show that here further. In Canada, they have that so-called Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Well, in Canada, we have Magna Carta rights, okay? We have unalienable rights. We don't need a charter, okay? And the Charter doesn't grant all those rights in the Magna Carta. And that's basically the same thing that the 14th Amendment did in the States. anyways, the rights of the original judicial citizens of the states as such are not under the consideration as in the 14th Amendment. They stand as they did before the 14th Amendment and are fully guaranteed by other provisions. That's common law. Civil rights under the 14th Amendment are for federal citizens and not state citizens. Same thing in Canada. Okay? Remember, if you read the Interpretation Act of Canada, we're going to go into that. But you have to understand that anything in statutes is for federal citizens. Okay? In their Interpretation Act, it even defines a person as a corporation. So why would you want those to be a second-class federal citizen? Federal citizens as parents have no right to the custody of their infant children except subject to the paramount right of the state. That's where that Child Protective Services and all that comes in. That's because they presume that you're one of their slaves. It's exactly where it is. The same thing exists in Canada. The charter adopted in 1982 refers to citizens of Canada. Okay, and what's Canada? Canada is a corporation. Courts have told us laws of Canada are federal laws. Citizens of Canada are federal citizens. Canadians include state citizens and federal citizens. And this is taken from the charter. Every citizen of Canada, that's section 3. I mean, it says that section 6.1, 6.2, 23.1, 23.2, and 23.3. It talks about citizens of Canada all over the place. And that's all corporate citizens. And this is section 3. It talks about every citizen of Canada has the right to vote in elections. Well, that means all elections are corporate, if you think about it. It's exactly what it means. Notwithstanding anything in this charter, the rights and freedoms referred to in it are guaranteed equally to male and female persons. And so that's in section 28.
The key word there, and to be qualified for membership therein. So if you're qualified for membership, if you don't want membership, it should be voluntary.
Well, that's right. Exactly.
So you don't have to be a member.
Yeah, that's right. I don't want to be a membership in your club.
And they literally stated there, you could be qualified for membership.
Right. Right. That's a good point. That's a very good point.
So why would you want to be a member?
I don't want to be. I hereby
revoke my consent.
renounce my
Membership status.
membership status. It is evident that they, U.S. citizens or citizens of Canada, have not the political rights which are vested in citizens of the states. This is if you read this is why they rigged the elections. Okay, especially the states. In Canada, it's harder to do because there's traditions that are in place that really make it difficult for them. And so that's why they have 4 parties, so then they can basically manipulate 20% of the people to run the country anyways. In the U.S. they clearly manipulate the elections, and this is why. It is evidence that they have not the political rights which are vested in citizens of the states. They are not constituents of any community in which they vested in any sovereign power of the government. Their position partakes more of the character of subjects than of citizens. They are subject to the laws of the United States or Canada as applicable, but have no voice in its management. If they are allowed to make laws, the validity of these laws is derived from the sanction of a government in which they are not represented. Mere citizenship they may have, but the political rights of citizens they cannot enjoy. Okay? They're talking about federal citizens here. Okay? That's exactly what they're talking about. And we're going to go into that some more. This is a California court case, 1870. Subject, national, citizen, okay? Citizen may indicate being a member of a sovereign state, especially one democratic forms and usages, owing it allegiance, sharing in individual political subjects. So, political rights, I'm sorry. Okay, so that's what a citizen is. Subject may imply a state of subjection to a person such as a monarch without much sense of membership in a political community or sharing in political rights. A national is a more general word, may apply to anyone owing permanent allegiance to a nation, and indicates one belonging to a broad category that includes both people who are legally citizens or subjects, but also people who have not attained such legal status. Okay? So you can be a national without being a citizen or subject. And that's very important. The U.S. passport application even talks about non-citizen nationals.
Yeah.
So remember, a citizen owes allegiance, okay, and a national owes allegiance to a nation, okay? There's a difference between owing allegiance to a nation or the Queen, okay? The Queen's a corporation, and so a subject would owe allegiance to the Queen, but a national would owe allegiance to a nation. In other words, I owe allegiance to you, my neighbors, and we all owe allegiance to each other, so I can't go and start giving away secrets to the Russians or to the US or to whoever. You see what I'm saying? Because of my allegiance to my friends and neighbors. You see what I'm saying? As a group, as a nation. Subject, constitutional law. One who owes allegiance to a sovereign and is governed by his laws. The nation of natives of Great Britain are subjects of the British government. Men in free governments are subjects as well as citizens. As citizens, they enjoy rights and franchises. As subjects, they are bound to obey the laws. The term is little used in this sense in countries enjoying a republican form of government. And that tells me that, and that's why they get up on national TV in the States and say that they have a democracy, because for most people that's what it is. It's not a republic anymore, and in Canada too. Okay, but again, you can have your republic. It can be here. You have to assert yourself, and we'll go through that. In our opinion, it is not the intent of the legislature to restrict the operation of the statute to those only who are subjects of the United States government. Did you know the U.S. has subjects? Yes, they do. Federal citizens are subjects. And exclude therefrom unnaturalized residents of foreign birth, whether white or black. Well, we're going to go through it some more. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were designed mainly for the protection of the newly emancipated Negroes. Okay, it has to do with slavery. But if you think about it, it's all about slavery. It's just a different form of slavery is what it is. You know, they say that there's going to be no slavery. Well, yes, there is. Anybody that's a subject is a slave. It's the only difference is that you have to volunteer to be the slave by voting for Parliament, and because then the Parliament does whatever they feel like doing. You know what I mean? And yes, you can all get together and change, but it's only if you can get agreement. And that's one of the biggest things they do, if you think about it, is divide and conquer, right? Isn't that what they do? They do it all the time. And whether it's by race, or the Jews, let's go after those Jews, or let's go after those Catholics, or let's go after those black people, or Orientals, or whatever. It's always something they use to divide and conquer. And that's one of the things that we have to, as sovereigns, we have to recognize that and not allow that to happen. Of course, every group has criminals. You know, in the States, they talk about white trash. Well, there's black trash and white trash. You know, it's everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. There's trash in every race and group. You know, and that's what you have to understand is there's criminals everywhere, and it doesn't matter what race it is, or religion or national origin or anything. That's what we have to understand, is that you know, we have to not allow ourselves to get diverted from the real issues. That's really what it comes down to, is and by doing that stuff, they divert your attention away from what the real issue is, and they do it on TV all the time. They divert your attention. And so I always watch TV. I was talking to I stayed overnight with my nephew and his wife, and she I guess would be my niece-in-law, I guess so, eh? Anyways, I was talking to her about that last night, and about how I watch TV with the idea in mind that this is the propaganda that they want you to think, and now what's the real stuff that's going on behind the scenes that they're not telling you, you know? And that's the way you have to watch the news. Upon the other hand, the 14th Amendment upon the subject of citizenship declares that only that, quote, all persons born and naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Here there is a limitation to persons born or naturalized in the United States, which is not extended to persons born in any place subject to their jurisdiction. Okay, so they're differentiating a little bit, so you can be born in Texas and not be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and so then you're not a U.S. citizen, okay, and that's the argument, okay? Same thing in Alberta. Of course, on the birth certificate, they put down that it's like in my straw man's birth certificate, it says Peace River, Canada. So they don't say anything about Alberta, okay? So there's the answer, okay? Well, I was born in the land of Alberta near Peace River. And I have no first-hand knowledge of a date of birth, you know? And anyways, so This is all stuff, you know, the first thing they did when I was in their torture chamber at Customs is they held a hearing after I was in there for 24 hours in their torture chamber. They keep it like at about 40 degrees, which is what, about 5 degrees Celsius or something like that, you know. And so I was freezing my butt off in there for about 24 hours. And so then they bring me out to for this show hearing. And the first thing that the magistrate wants to know is the date of birth. And I said, well, I have no first-hand knowledge of a date of birth. Do you have first-hand knowledge of your date of birth? And any evidence of any date of birth is hearsay evidence. And she was basically going to leave me in their torture chamber if I didn't produce the date of birth. And so, you know, it was coercion. And that was one of the first things I brought up in my paperwork, is that she wasn't unbiased. She was helping the Crown build a case, fabricate evidence of their straw man, you know. And in the hearing, I had a hearing last Tuesday, and the judge was very nice. You know, you hear these stories about the judge saying common law doesn't apply in here, and I don't want to hear another word about it. And they basically railroad people. Well, this judge was not like that at all. And I think it's because I had my ducks in a row, and I had already filed a couple of documents into the case and told him, you know, the stuff that was going on. And so he was very respectful. He was very nice. He